Hello, I am Becky Floyd. I am a professor of anthropology and founder of Death Education Central. Today's lecture is on the hidden history of Halloween. Now, you've probably heard the usual Halloween origin stories, something about Irish immigrants, trick-or-treating, carving pumpkins, and dressing up to scare away ghosts. And yes, all of that is part of the tale. But like most things touched by time, tradition, and the shifting needs of humanity, Halloween has deeper roots, tangled in myth, ritual, and religion. So this is not your typical Halloween history lesson. Today we'll be taking a different path, one that winds through pre-Christian harvest festivals, brushes against the veil between the living and the dead, and follows the quiet footsteps of ancestors whose beliefs shaped what we now call spooky season. We'll look beneath the plastic skeletons and mass-produced spiderwebs to uncover what Halloween really meant to those who first lit fires against the dark, not just to frighten spirits away, but to commune with them. So, whether you're here for the folklore, the fear, or the forgotten, welcome. Let's begin our descent into the hidden history of Halloween. Across time and culture, people have imagined special days when the boundary between the living and the dead thins, when the departed may briefly return and the living pause to remember, honor, and commune. These festivals often fall in autumn or spring, the natural seasons of change, when life itself reminds us that all things move in cycles. The leaves fall, the light fades, the veil thins. And through these transitions, humanity continues to perform the same quiet miracle, transforming grief into celebration and remembrance into renewal. One familiar example is Halloween, which grew from an ancient Celtic festival marking the end of harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. The Celts called this day Samhain, their New Year's Eve, celebrated at the turning of November. They believed that during Samhain, the gates between the worlds opened, allowing the souls of those who had died in the past year to cross into the other world. To honor this passage, families prepared offerings of food, lit great bonfires, and sometimes disguised themselves as spirits and wild creatures, not merely to frighten, but to participate in the mystery of transformation. When Christianity took root in Ireland during the 4th and 5th centuries, missionaries practiced what we might call theology through translation. They reframed indigenous traditions within Christian terms, rather than attempting to erase them. In this process, November 1st was declared All Saints' Day, a time to venerate holy figures without feast days of their own. The evening before, October 31st, became the Eve of All Hallows, or Hallows Even, and eventually Halloween. Yet the original meanings lingered. The following century brought the addition of All Souls' Day on November 2nd, dedicated to all who had died, echoing Samhain's concern for the collective dead rather than the sanctified few. Bonfires still burned, food was still offered, and masked revelers still walked the night, echoing the ancient belief that this was a time for the wandering souls. We see this same rhythm of remembrance in other traditions. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, merges Catholic All Saints and All Souls observances with indigenous Mesoamerican ancestor rituals. During these days, the family, both the living and the dead, gather again. Altars glow with marigolds, candles, and photographs, and the air is filled with laughter, food, and music. Samhain is an ancient Celtic festival that marks the end of summer and the beginning of winter, a season symbolically tied to death and renewal. It was the Celtic New Year, observed on the night of October 31st. In Old Irish, Samhain literally means summer's end, a poetic reminder that every ending contains the seeds of beginning. Traditionally, household fires were extinguished and then rekindled from the great festival bonfire, uniting the community in shared light before the long, dark months ahead. Samhain marked the third and final harvest, a time to store provisions, count blessings, and acknowledge losses. It was a time of both gratitude and reckoning, of taking inventory of life and releasing what was weak, worn, or no longer needed. According to Celtic belief, this was the night when the veil between worlds grew thinnest, when the living might commune with their ancestors and the spirits of the departed could return home once more. Families prepared cakes and offerings for these wandering souls, not in fear, but in hospitality, to nourish and honor the dead who remained part of the household in spirit. Over time, these rites blended with Christian observances. As the Eve of All Hallows, or Halloween, the festival retained its focus on death, transition, and remembrance, but its older echoes still hum beneath the surface. The modern American custom of trick-or-treating may have descended from an Irish peasant practice of going door to door to collect food, bread, cheese, apples, eggs, or butter, in preparation for the festival of Saint Columba, an early Irish abbot and missionary of the 6th century. In England, similar customs evolved around All Souls' Day parades, when the poor would beg for food and receive soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. The church encouraged this as a Christian alternative to leaving food and wine out for wandering spirits. The practice, called going a-souling, was later taken up by children who received small ale, sweets, or coins, the earliest shadows of modern trick-or-treating. By the 1st century AD, Roman rule had spread across Celtic lands, and with it came new layers of ritual. 2 Roman festivals merged with Samhain: Feralia, a day of honoring the dead in late October, and the Feast of Pomona, goddess of fruit and orchards. Her symbol, the apple, lingered within Samhain traditions and likely gave rise to the custom of apple bobbing, once a form of divination about love and fate. In this way, Samhain became a perfect example of cultural layering, a tapestry woven from Celtic, Roman, and Christian threads. What began as a harvest rite transformed into a meditation on death, remembrance, and renewal, the quiet, eternal rhythm that continues to echo in our modern Halloween. Ghosts, with their skeletal kin, are perhaps the most obvious symbols of Halloween, silent emissaries from the land of the dead. But the darker hours of All Hallows' Eve also belong to a larger menagerie of nocturnal beings, the mischief makers, the shapeshifters, and the wild things that go bump in the night. Let's call them collectively goblins. In French folklore, goblins are wandering sprites, not quite dead, not quite demonic, who attach themselves to households and blur the lines between helper and harasser. They dwell in caves and grottos, but are irresistibly drawn to homes with laughter, good wine, and beautiful children. Once inside, they might sweep the hearth or clean the kitchen, but they might also scold naughty children, bang pots and pans, rearrange furniture, or snatch blankets off of the sleeping. Their nature is mercurial, sometimes helpful, sometimes maddening. If they overstay their welcome, folk tradition says you can rid yourself of a goblin by scattering flaxseed across the floor. The goblin, compelled to clean every last speck, eventually grows tired and leaves. These tricky house spirits appear all over Europe in various guises. brownies in Scotland and England, kobolds in Germany, domoviks in Russia, each culture giving shape to the belief that unseen entities share our homes and our fates. And at Halloween, when the veil is thinnest, these spirits are said to walk freely among us. In modern Halloween folklore, our cast of monsters has expanded to include witches, zombies, werewolves, and vampires. Though their appearances vary across time and media, they all serve a similar symbolic purpose: to remind us of the limits of logic, the persistence of mystery, and the humbling truth that not everything can be explained by science, sense, or sight. These creatures, whether ancient or invented, are messengers. They remind us that the darkened hours of the year, something ancient still stirs. And whether we fear it, play with it, or offer it candy at our doorstep, we are participating in a ritual as old as firelight, a dance with the unknown. We usually think of jack-o'-lantern as a grinning pumpkin glowing warmly on a front porch. But long before it became a seasonal craft project, the jack-o'-lantern was something far more eerie and far more symbolic. The name jack-o'-lantern originally referred to a mysterious light seen flickering over swamps and marshes. Across cultures, this ghostly glow has believed to be the manifestation of a lost soul, a wandering spirit, or even a death omen. In English folklore, it's also been called will-o'-the-wisp or corpse light. In Ireland, it goes by fairy light or foxfire. In every case, the idea is the same: an otherworldly flame that appears in the dark, beckoning travelers off the safe path and into danger. Legends say that jack-o'-lantern is a soul denied heaven and hell, cursed to drift between worlds. Sometimes it wears a luminous cloak. Sometimes it carries a wisp of burning straw. But always it roams the night, luring the curious and the careless into the unknown. To protect oneself, it was said you could carry iron, a knife, a nail, anything forged from the earth, or place it into the ground to anchor yourself in the physical world. In Ireland, children were warned to wear their coats inside out after dark so as not to be recognized or claimed by the wandering flame. In Sweden, the light was believed to be the spirit of an unbaptized child, trying to lead travelers to water in hopes of receiving a baptism it never had in life. Even outside Europe, this light appears. The Penobscot people of North America called it fire demon, with glowing fingers that skim milk from dairies by night. In the Appalachians, floating balls of fire would rise into the hills and light the ground like daylight. Some said they foretold death or disaster. In parts of Africa, the jack-o'-lantern appears as witch fire, either a witch flying in light form or a burning warning sent to terrify the guilty. And in all these versions, the light carries one core message: you are not alone in the darkness. As Christianity and Halloween merged, this haunting image took on new purpose. The carved pumpkin became both a symbol and a shield. On Halloween night, the glowing jack-o'-lantern came to frighten away evil spirits, especially as trick-or-treaters carried them from house to house like miniature talismans. But even now, flickering behind those toothy pumpkin grins is the memory of something older, a story about light that wanders, spirits that linger, and thresholds that glow between life and death. Long before the jack-o'-lantern was a pumpkin glowing on a porch, he was a man named Jack, a blacksmith, a scoundrel, and a trickster. This folktale, told across Ireland, Scotland, and England, explains how Jack became the eternal wanderer, lighting the night with only a stolen ember and a hollowed-out root vegetable. As one version of the tale goes, and like all folk tales and myths, it exists in many forms, Jack was a clever but prideful blacksmith who made a deal with the devil himself. he'd trade his soul for the power to be the greatest smith on earth. The devil agreed, planning to return in 7 years to collect. But Jack wasn't finished bargaining. When the devil came to claim him, Jack invited him to sit in his enchanted chair, and it was a trap. The devil couldn't rise until Jack demanded another 7 years of life. When the devil returned again, Jack tricked him up into a tree, refusing to let him down until another extension was granted. A third time, Jack lured the devil into his magical coin purse, trapping him yet again and beating the purse with his tools until the devil, now thoroughly humiliated, promised never to take Jack's soul. Eventually, Jack died, as even the clever must, but his soul had nowhere to go. Heaven rejected him for living a dishonorable life, and hell slammed its gates, still smarting from Jack's tricks. With no resting place, Jack was cursed to wander the earth eternally, a lost soul between worlds. The devil, perhaps mockingly, tossed him a single ember from hell to light his way. Jack placed the ember inside a hollowed-out turnip and became Jack of the Lantern. In Ireland and Britain, turnips and rutabagas were traditionally carved into lanterns to represent Jack's ghost light, flickering warnings to travelers or trickster spirits in disguise. When the tradition came to America, pumpkins, native to the New World and easier to carve, replaced the turnip. But inside every glowing jack-o'-lantern still burns the ancient ember, a reminder of the soul who tricked the devil and found himself trapped not in fire or paradise, but in liminality, forever in between. Halloween is a paradox, a celebration of life's abundance and death's inevitability, wrapped in masks and lit by fire. It is both a harvest festival and a Day of the Dead, honoring fertility in all its forms, the fertility of the land, the body, the ancestral line. That we use a plump, luminous gourd to mark the season is no accident. The pumpkin, native to the Americas, is part of the ancient agricultural trio known as the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, which sustained indigenous people for thousands of years. In this way, the jack-o'-lantern is more than decoration. It is a symbol of Earth's generosity, glowing with the light of memory, of gratitude, and survival. Yet even as we celebrate life's harvest, we must acknowledge its twin, death. Human beings tend to make sense of the world through opposites, light and dark, growth and decay, sex and death. This symbolic linkage of sex and death, the generative and the terminal, appears in many cultures, often through ancestor rituals, fertility rites, or mythic structures of rebirth. And Halloween, perhaps more than any other holiday, invites us to sit with both sides of the coin. To live, something must die. The crops we eat, the animals we raise, even time itself must be sacrificed for us to mark its passage. The season reminds us to confront death in order to celebrate life, to thank those who came before us, whose lives and deaths made our own possible. To honor the dead is to acknowledge that without sex, there are no generations, and without death, there is no ancestry, no memory, no story, no us. As anthropologists know, death rituals tell us everything about what a culture values most. In confronting the dead, we are forced to ask what truly matters. And so, even amidst the candy and costumes, Halloween reveals our deepest truths, that joy and grief walk hand in hand, and that life becomes most vivid when set against the backdrop of death. For me, that's why I keep the spirit of Halloween alive all year long. Not the commercial trappings, but the invitation to remember, to honor, to savor the time we're given. Because this is the only life I know for sure I will have, and it is worthy of reverence. Thank you for watching or listening to my presentation on the hidden history of Halloween. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you would like to explore more, I do have some selected references for you to follow. In particular, there is a reference to a link to you can hear a folklorist tell the full tale of Jack and the Devil. It is listed, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth item down here, Spooky Stories for Halloween 2022, Folk Life Today podcast from the Library of Congress blog. And if you follow that link or look it up, you will be able to listen to this extraordinary tale in its full depth and length. Thank you once again for listening. Happy Halloween.